All right, good morning, guten Morgen. Woo! Well, here we are once again in this crazy room where it all happens. Who was here yesterday for my thing? A few of you, so I can't repeat any of that. Damn it. So, Klotz Cables has sponsored this particular clinic that I'm doing today. I've been enjoying using their cables quite a bit. They sound great. They've been taking the Rode treatment. And I do enjoy having the cable where you unplug it and it doesn't make noise. And then you can plug it back in. And lo and behold, so I don't make those annoying noises when I'm switching guitars. I do switch a few guitars these days. For the longest time, I would bring like one guitar and one spare and just play everything on one guitar. Because I like things simple. You know, you go through phases as a guitar player where you're like, I have to be able to show everybody all that I'm able to do. You know, so if you're, you know, a Strat person and you have all these wiggle bar tricks and so on and so forth, I gotta have my Strat because I gotta be able to have that whole palette of those flavors. And then I got to the point where I was like, I don't need to do any of that. I just need to have one instrument that's going to stay in tune for me, and it's going to fight me. So a Telecaster is the type of guitar where it's very simple, and it's up to you. It's like a blank canvas. It's all up to you to make it all happen. There's 3 sounds. They're all good. It's a guitar that can take punishment, and as I like to say, at the end of time, in a post-apocalyptic world, there's going to be cockroaches and Telecasters, and the Telecasters will be in tune. Which is no comfort for humankind, but you know, what are you going to do? And that's the reason why I like playing Telecaster. But I got to the point now where I like to have some different flavors on the road. So I've been taking along when I'm at home. I bring a 335. I usually start the night out on a 335, and I'll switch to playing some slide, which I'll do momentarily on my other Reverend signature guitar, the Gristle 90, which has P90 pickups on it. And I keep that tuned to open G. And then I have my new signature S-type guitar with Reverend that just came out on September 20th. And I'll do some of the things that I do on the Strats of tunes I've written over the years. I had a record called Strat's Got Your Tongue. And people are like, well, you're a Tele guy. I was like, yeah, but I didn't. I used to play a Strat all the time. So I have definitely tunes that I've written in different types of sounds that I like to do on that kind of a guitar. And then I'll just switch to this one. And every time I plug into this kind of guitar, they just sound the best to me. It's simple. It's a powerful sound. It cuts through. You know, Les Pauls are a similar thing. You know, an old Les Paul is a bright guitar. A lot of people, you know, who grew up in my generation, we only had played like the Les Pauls that were made in the 70s, which are a darker sounding guitar. But the vintage ones, the ones that everyone wants to buy for, you know, $300,000 or whatever the case may be, the old Les Pauls, they're actually meaty sounding Telecasters for the most part. They're very bright sounding. But that being said, nothing sounds like a Telecaster. It has the ability to be clangful, but it's also good for jazz stuff. It's great for blues. It's great for rock and roll. And a lot of people don't realize the whole first Led Zeppelin record was done on a Telecaster, you know, so they can kind of do it all. And the pickups that I developed with Fishman take a little bit of the hassle of Telecasters away in terms of, you know, there can be some microphonic activity that goes on, there can be some 60 cycle hum. I have a second voice on these pickups, which allows me to press this button in. So that's kind of what I like to do. I just sit down and play. That was basically a blues, but I did do some random key changes, and that's what's just kind of fun. When you get to the point where I was a long time where I had to play with a band. I saw this thing that Clapton did like in 1968 where he was sitting down, he's got the multicolored SG, and he described himself as a lead accompanist. So he played lead guitar in a band. And I thought, well, that's kind of what I do. I mean, I play rhythm, but I have to play with a band in order to sound complete. And I would do a lot of workshops back in the day, and I would play with tracks. You know, I used to have them on CD, and then of course we had them on phones and whatever else. But I never liked that because it's at some point it's like guitarioke. You know what I mean? You're playing along with tracks, and it's set duration, and without question there's going to be a balance problem. And then of course they skip sometimes, or else just randomly they'll just stop playing, and there you are looking like a jackass, right? So I started getting to the point where I just wanted to be able to make music sitting by myself and have it sound complete. Even if I'm doing single note lines, having the groove be so self-evident that it's just complete as a solo thing. And that's been satisfying, because it's just fun to just kind of sit around and play and think, well, I don't need a band if I don't have to, you know, so it's kind of fun. And some of the things that I did in that thing, there's nothing better than a little call and response thing for improvising. You know, a lot of people ask me, you know, I used to do a ton of online lessons. I don't do as much anymore because we're traveling so much. But inevitably, I'll have people asking about, listen, you know, when I improvise, I play, if I'm doing a blues and I'm doing 2 choruses on a blues, by the time I'm done with the first chorus, I've played every lick I know. And can you help me with, you know, more ideas for improvising? And so my thought is that you should always approach improvising as a conversation. And licks are only words in your sentences or your communications. So if it doesn't make sense to say the same words over and over and over again, or to try to put a word into a sentence that doesn't make any sense, then why would you play that way, right? So I just try to make people realize that the call and response thing, trying to get something going improvising wise, a call and response or sequential type playing where you might play a little something rhythmically, and maybe you don't respond to it exactly the same way melodically, but rhythmically you're doing something similar. That can kind of jumpstart the process of improvising, where you're just following a stream of consciousness instead of, oh, I gotta play this lick here. And that's a big mind shift for people, because, as I said, they're like, oh, I gotta do this lick, and now I gotta do this lick, and I gotta put this lick in here, and now I've run out of licks. It shouldn't be about licks, it should be about the conversation. So that call and response thing, is a good way to go about it. Even if it's simple, a lot of times I like to just use it. So in that whole thing, I didn't really play licks. Thank you. I mean, there were some licks in there per se, but basically you're just responding to whatever you just did, rhythmically, and sometimes you find yourself playing things you've never played before and will never play since. And that's really kind of the purpose of improvising, to me anyway. And I mean, there is like, you know, whenever I would play, I did go to school for jazz, but I don't know many standards. I know a couple maybe. I didn't really want to know the bebop language per se, because it is a language. You know, you gotta kind of study and do the transcriptions of the various different folks if you want to play that style legitimately. But to me, it becomes you're speaking that language, and that language is kind of like Latin now. Latin used to be the language of the world that everyone spoke, and it made perfect sense. Now it's more of kind of an academic language, and it's not the same analogy, but it's similar. I mean, unfortunately, I love jazz, and there's a bunch of great purveyors of new jazz. I love Julian Lange, magnificent guitar player, and great musician. He just makes great music. But a lot of times, the language of jazz to me, and to a lot of people, it just, as soon as they hear, it immediately takes them to the Lido deck of a cruise ship, you know what I mean? That's not necessarily, but, so I try to avoid just stock phrases, even though I have some. So I've put together various different things that I think are my personal favorite licks and so on and so forth, and I'll have them in my vocabulary, but I'll only yank them out here and there when I think it's appropriate. Other than that, I might mutate them on the spot. You know, I might do them a certain way or think, I'm gonna do that thing, but I'm gonna do it different, you know? You know, even if I'm doing like a shuffle thing. From this. And they were kind of like these stock money shot licks, I used to call them, that, you know, Johnny Winter would do. him. But I like to take them and just mess them up a little bit and take them and do them in ways that maybe you shouldn't do. But that's what's cool, is that you make them different instead of just regurgitating the same old, same old. Anyway, so improvising is the thing that does it for me. And again, I'll just sit around the house and do various different things, you know. And sometimes I'll just, you know, if I'm feeling like a little Hendrix-y type of a thing, you know, last night we did version of this Hendrix song they did at Woodstock. And I didn't do anything like Hendrix did it. But one of my favorite things about Hendrix is that he always improvised stuff. It was never stock. It was different every time. And you could just tell he had fun. You know, it's like, and he knew just enough to get himself in trouble. He didn't know about jazz harmony, but his ear was better than most, and he could kind of feel things out. You could just tell he loved to play guitar. He loved the sound of the guitar. He loved what the guitar did. And every time he played, he was just having fun and looking awesome in those suits that he would wear. I mean, to this day, you look at old Jim, he never takes a bad picture. But anyway, so this is just like a minor blues. And I got the univibe on here, which is that sound. It's kind of funny. It's like Hendrix really kind of invented the univibe sound, but then Robin Trower did it. And I love me some Robin Trower, don't get me wrong. But it's funny, every time you use a univibe now, people are like, oh, it's Robin Trower. It's like, well, actually, it's Jimmy. But maybe that is a way. So what's cool about this tune is it's a minor blues, and it's just basically, you know, a minor 1. There goes the minor 4. And then back to the minor 1 again. And then it goes up to the sharp 5, which you can just do as an F major. I do like an F minor 9. After that. And sometimes to get back to the 1, I'll go half step above the root of the B flat 13 or 9. So then. That's a good Sunday afternoon song, I think. After we've all been pummeled all weekend long by the power of rock. Any questions out there on anything that I'm doing? You can, yes?
You play a lot of those licks. By the way, I'm not super familiar with your material, but
Okay.
I noticed that you play a lot of those licks where you do those pre-bends.
Yes.
Could you maybe
Talk about the pre-bending stuff?
to whatever extent it's possible at this distance,
Sure.
show like which fingers do the pre-bend? Is it the whole chord?
Sometimes it is the whole chord. So it all kind of stemmed from originally, I mean, I was doing bends where there were two notes were stationary and then I'd bend something up. So like an A7.
So that's
Only the index fingers bending the G string up. Then I'll do that same 7, but it's a different inversion up there. So, and then I heard James Burton do this, where he would take like A7. So he's grabbing the major third, the flat 7, and the 9, and then he would pre-bend that, and then you resolve it by going back down. So I'm bending all three. Yeah, all three are pre-bent. Okay? And then what I realized is, well, you can put your pinky down as well and get the B string a little bit. And then what's cool is if you add a volume swell with it, you get this. Right. This is an A9, but I've got the third in the bass. So I've got it, or you can also look at it's the same voicing as a C sharp minor 7 flat 5, but when you put the A in the bass, it's an A9. I call it the T-Bone Walker chord. You're bending that chord, you can bend any damn chord you want. So if I go to the 4, I can go, or there's these really cool inversions of 13th chords for, so this D9, right? I can put the 7th in the bass and do this chord. It's a different inversion of a D9 with the 7th in the I can also put the root on the top. It's kind of a cool groove anyway. You go. Anyways, this particular chord sounds good bent. So I'll go. Right.
I don't understand much about harmony because I'm a rock and roll guy, but when the chord is half a step then up,
Yes.
does that have to make sense harmonically, or does it matter as long as you're landing on the?
As long as you're resolving to where you want to go, it's kind of whatever works.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and you just kind of intuitively like go, that doesn't quite work. But yeah, you should just the rules are there are no rules as long as you resolve. And that goes the same way for the progression. Like sometimes I'll throw in the 3-6-2-5 thing or the 2-5 or and sometimes that 2 is major and sometimes the 2 is minor. It's open to interpretation, especially when you're playing by your lonesome. With a band and you have another harmonic instrument, you gotta be a little bit more mindful. In a trio situation with a bass player, you have a little bit more freedom. But yeah, all those different progressions are, you can kind of do whatever you want. There's rules, but there's no rules, as long as it sounds good and you resolve at some point. Yes? Yes?
Did I hear correct that you played the chord in German, I think? Not the chord, and then arpeggios
You're talking about that last song. It's a Hendrix tune.
Okay.
It was a song that Hendrix played at Woodstock, and it's just a minor. And there's different versions of it. He called it Villanova Junction, or they named it that. And he said, yeah, whatever. And but he would do it differently. There's a bunch of different versions of him doing stuff, but I just do a version where it's a minor blues. So it goes 1, it goes to 4, goes back to the 1, and then it goes up to the sharp 5 chord, which would be, or flat 6, depending on what you want to call it. So it goes F major, and it can, and sometimes, and again, this is open to interpretation. I might do an F minor 9. Back to the D minor, and then back to the A minor. But to get to the A minor, I might throw in a half step above that B flat 9 chord or 13. You can kind of play over that as well. So if I'm doing F, I can also make it a dominant 7. I'm playing over. Sounds good on a minor 2 to start to diminish thing a half step down from the root, so I can start on. That little thing there to anticipate the 4, I'm just doing a Dorian a half step above my root. So instead of being an A Dorian, I'm doing a B flat Dorian. And then going to the D Dorian. And then I can do that B flat. F, I can do. So I'm doing an A harmonic minor over that F chord, which is kind of. That's kind of a cool little substitution. I'm doing an augmented 9th chord, or augmented 7. So over a minor blues, you can keep it real simple and just do a minor pentatonic. good too. That's just A minor pentatonic the whole time over all those chords. So that's what the tunes I like to play now a lot is, you know, when I would write songs back in the day, I always thought they had to be more sophisticated than just a regular blues progression. Yes, sir.
How important is music theory for you?
It's helpful. I mean, it's not. A lot of people get carried away. I like to apply it where it makes sense, but to know it and not know how to apply it.
Yes, because you said only each accord, you said exactly what is it, knowing egg, and so what.
Well, a lot of times, you know, back in the day, I learned what the theory was, but I didn't really know how to apply it per se. And the person that I probably learned more from how to apply it than anything else was probably Robin Ford. I got to know Robin a bit, and we played a bunch. And I didn't really want to sound like Robin, because Robin's himself, and I was always obsessed with the idea of, well, you should sound like yourself. But the way that he applied theory to playing over blues and, you know, rootsy stuff was very instructive to me. So then I was able to, you know, like, one of the things that always perplexed me was, you know, using the melodic minor scale to play over certain things that sounded good. Like when I'm doing that B flat chord right before the A. You know. That's, you know, when I'm playing over that chord, even though it doesn't have to be a flat 5 or a raised 11 chord, I'm basically doing a scale, and I had to make it make sense to me. Instead of thinking of it as, okay, well, this is a F melodic minor, that gets confusing as hell. So I just see, oh, this is a B flat 7th chord with a flatted 5, so I know this shape works. Okay, which is basically, it's a Mixolydian scale with a flatted 5th.
You know it all.
Yeah, and so then there it is. That's all you need to know. But if you start going, but if I said, you know, over that B flat 7, I'm using an F melodic minor scale, you'd be like, what? That doesn't make any sense. And then it's like math. You need your abacus out. Whereas if you're, you know, a lot of times visual cues are great. You know, okay, this visual chord, I know I can use this visual scale, and then once the visuals are identified, then your ear takes over, and then you start making more sense of being able to just hear what's coming as opposed to the visuals of it. But one of the great things about the guitar is that you can establish a visual connection to the theory in a way that other instruments can't necessarily do, which is another reason why guitar players are the best. All right, how are we doing on time? How much time do we have today?
45.
We got 45. Oh, so we're good. You can go for a little over. Any other questions? Don't be afraid. Yes, sir. That's a good question. Do I still practice? I play all the time, so I don't know what could be defined as practice. But what I perceive as practice as I try to maintain. You know, I've got several hundred of my own songs, right? And if I want to keep them in a practicable, performance-ready condition, I have to run them. I have to practice them, right? And then I also have a certain bunch of tunes or arrangements of other people's songs that I've done, especially any of that Chet Atkins, you know, pick and finger stuff where it's a lot of muscle memory. I have to practice that. And there's a great quote that Chet Atkins said years ago, which is great. And this is specifically for this type of arrangement. I'm talking about those arrangements where it's, you know, where you're doing, you know. I need to practice those things to make sure that they're performance ready. So Chet had this quote about that. He'd say, if I don't practice for one day, I notice it. If I don't practice for 2 days, my friends can notice it. And if I don't practice for 3 days, everyone can notice it. So, I mean, that's a little over the top, but when you're playing those types of things, which are very muscle memory oriented, where they're kind of set arrangements, I mean, there's a bit of improvisation with the way I'll attack those chords and the melody. But if you want to maintain, as I said, kind of calibrating everything so that everything's working, I have to run through those. So I'll practice that stuff. But a lot of times I just play. And it might be one of those things where I'll start playing and I'll come up with like a new kind of lick or way of using theory in a way that's different. And I'll practice that and kind of suss it out. But that immediately leads to probably writing a song using some new chord or some new idea. So then I'll get segued off into that, and I record them on my cell phone quite a bit. If I come up with a new idea now, I always put it on my cell phone, because if I don't, I'll forget. I used to never forget, but as you get older, you forget shit. So I just put them on my phone. So, but I would say, I mean, on this tour, I haven't been bringing a guitar into the hotel room just because we've been playing every night. My fingers actually are starting to get a little sore. What happens is I bend so much is that my cuticle starts to come away from the finger. And so it gets a little sore. So I find that I haven't been practicing during the day, and I save it for sound check and the gig, and that's been saving my hands a little bit. I don't have carpal tunnel issues or any of that kind of stuff. But just when I'm playing a lot, especially the bending, I get a little sore. As soon as I start playing again, it's gone. But to save my fingers a little bit, I've been kind of not practicing during the day. Yes, sir?
Did you ever use a thumb pick like Brent Mason?
I kind of got into that style. The question was, have I used a thumb pick like Brent Mason? You know, when I first got into, you know, that kind of... to it, but I was already so used to playing with pick and fingers that I didn't want to have a buddy of mine in college would do this style of playing. He was a little older than me, and I would do that Merle Travis stuff. And he'd have a little lozenge container in this pocket of his guitar, and he would take it out, and he would take out his thumb pick, and he would start doing it. And there's a thing that happens when you play with your pick, thumb pick, and fingers. You have a lot more dexterity. That's kind of like when you see Matteo Mancuso when he's using his finger. Your fingers are going to do things that you holding a pick are not going to do. It's a level of freedom, and once you get that down, it's a level of chops that's unparalleled. So the thumb pick with that, but I just didn't want to make the sacrifice of transitioning over.
And are there, as a thumb pick, are there any licks you can only play with a thumb pick? You would say,
I don't think so. I just think that it's easier to be fluid in terms of like alternate picking. You know, when you see guys like Tommy Emmanuel and Brent Mason and the Scotty Anderson guy and various other proponents of or what Chet Atkins used to do, you know, there's just a fluidity that happens that you can do with the pick, but it's a different thing. It's much harder with a pick. So I have said in the past that if I could do it all over again, I'd start with a thumb pick. But there is something about being challenged by holding the pick that makes you play differently. So it is what it is. But a thumb pick is definitely, especially if you're into that style of playing, and if I did it all the time, I might consider switching over to a thumb pick, but so far I've avoided the urge. Questions, don't be afraid. Yes? Sometimes I use my pinky, but not so much in the Travis picking. I like, I use it when I do like the block voicing. I'll use my pinky. I also use it when I'm doing my octave thing. I flick. Or like. So I'll use it with that little flick thing. But I'm not using it with the Travis stuff. Question, there was another question. Yes?
Can you tell us more about how you use effects when you do your sound?
Sure. I've got my new pedal that came out at this show actually for Jam Pedals from Greece. And it's the Koch Monster, ladies and gentlemen. But I like to use effects sparingly. You know what I mean? I use it for certain things. As you heard when I do that Jimmy tune, it's fun to have that univibe sound. I mean, there's nothing that. I mean, that's the Jimmy sound, right? So, but I'd probably use that once or twice a night, you know. But it's there if I want it. So I kind of like having the palette of stuff. Now, delay-wise, I mean, this amp has reverb on it, and I've always had amps with reverb, but lately I've been using more of a Marshall type of a sound with my Tone King Royalist. And I have it kind of on the JTM 45 setting, and there's no reverb on the amp, and I'm getting used to no reverb, and so I like to supplant it with delay. But sometimes I'll just have no reverb, and it's just, but I usually have a little bit of a slap back. Subtler than that. I always change it. It's never the same. So if I turn the reverb off on the amp, and just a little bit of juice. And I just set it for one repeat. And not a ton of delay, but it's enough that you know it's there. And then I like to use the amps clean so that I can use gain on the pedal and not overdrive the sound of the delay, right? So there's a clean boost on my Gristle King pedal. And then there's the gain. Just hear a little bit of that slap. But you don't really hear the delay all that much. It's just kind of there. And I also like a longer delay, but again, it's more subtle. Just enough. And usually what I'll do is a lot of times I'll have both the slap back on and the longer delay. Overdrive the most, but I also like just kind of a straight tube screamer type of sound. And there's a Lucy Dreamer out here, their version of a tube screamer. usually used in conjunction with my clean boost. So it sounds more like this. A little boost on that as well. Sometimes when I'm playing, I'll add, I'll use my Gristle King pedal, and I'll have that on with the gain. And then I'll put on the Tube Screamer as well, the Lucy Dream. And that's kind of pushing it over the top a bit, but what's nice about that is if I'm in this particular setting, I can really get some nice sustain. On like 4, so it's not like it's cranked, but with those pedals it does the job. Oh, we're gonna be done now? It's time. Sorry folks, we've run out of time. It's been fun. Thank you so much for coming, and hope to see you soon. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Yes, sir. Thank you.